All right. Welcome to this episode of Kimchi Kids podcast. We are very excited to introduce our guest today. She has a very impressive list of accolades. I'm only going to name a few. 2017 Jean Banchet Rising Chef, 2018 Food and Wine Best New Chef, recently nominated for the third time Best Chef Great Lakes from the James Beard Awards. She is the executive chef and owner of Tocaya Antojeria here in Chicago's Logan Square neighborhood. Also previously nominated for Best New Restaurant in 2018 and a three-time recipient of the Michelin Bib Gourmand. It is our pleasure and honor to welcome to the show Chef Diana Davila.
Hey.
Welcome. Awesome. So, Diana, I just want to get started here. So, having been raised myself in a family that owned a Korean restaurant, I can recall back on memories when I was a kid, spending a lot of time in the restaurant. And I wanted to hear from you, what are some of your fondest memories of kind of being a child in a restaurant and growing up in that kind of setting?
I loved it. You know, I have two other siblings, and they never liked it. I was the one that was like, "Oh, are we going to the restaurant? Are we going to the restaurant?" I loved everything about it. My parents were always quite the hosts when they would have like dinner parties. And so it was always really I just felt like if it was another sort of party, my mom's always been such a gracious host, knowing people saying hi, getting to know people. I thought that the cooks were the coolest people in the world, it's just, so much activity, so I guess I could see how some people wouldn't like it, but I really, really just enjoyed everything about it, It was also, both my parents were working parents, and when they've opened up their first taqueria, it was, so they could have something for themselves, entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And it was also a way to spend a little bit more time with the family, because sometimes it could be rough, you don't get to see, my mom would work nights, my dad would work in the morning, get home at 6. And so it just kind of was more time with the family as well. So I always enjoyed it. And I also really, really always loved the fact that on Saturdays, my dad would go out. We would wake up super early, at 4 a.m., and we would go out all over Chicago to kind of get the produce for the week. Oh, and so that was kind of a special, such a daddy's girl, such a special time for us, because we would stop by. We would eat 4 or 5 times,
I love that.
This is the spot for the tamales. This is the spot for the champurrado. This is the spot for these quesadillas, that we really like. So we would go to a million places and switch it up all the time. And that was always a lot of fun for me, a little bonding time. And to this day, I feel like I'm closer to my dad because of that time that we spent together.
I love that.
Who was the chef of the restaurant when you grew up?
So it wasn't so much it wasn't chef centric at all. It was your kind of stereotypical taqueria.
Everyone's doing everything.
Everybody, combination number 1, combination number 2. Nice. You could get a sope, enchilada suiza, and a tostada. It was your prototypical sort of thing. Again, they were opening this so they could, be entrepreneurs and have something for themselves. They both still kept working. Yeah. They had people in charge, that. In fact, 2 of the guys that were in charge of, at one point they had a good amount of locations. They're still super great friends, and they're literally a part, of our family. They're at every single family function. They were there pretty much from just about the beginning to the end. The year that they closed their last one was the year that Tocaya opened.
Oh, really? So you guys were actually able to expand the restaurant.
They did, yeah. They had like at one time, I think the most they had was like five different places. Yeah. And
We're
again, it
struggling
was
with
nice.
one. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, fast. I mean, it was fast food too. Like
Yeah.
it was all sort of like fast casual. They did open one that ended up being more, like not more. It was totally like meant to be upscale and sit down and like way more elaborate. And that was the one that was struggled
Yeah,
the
for
most.
sure.
That struggled the most. But nonetheless, really happy that we did it.
Yeah. And now that you have children of your own, is that something that, are your kids coming by the restaurant? And do you see yourself kind of in your kids, like, running around there? And
I do. I mean, they're at the restaurant, of course. The restaurant is right by. We live right close. We live super close to the restaurant. Our school is like across the street. So, I pick them up every day there. I just walk across the street pretty much, get them situated. They eat family meal.
I love that.
Go do pre-shift. They stick around for an hour or two. Then my husband picks them up when he's done with work. They're not, 7 and 10. They're not, I feel like I want to get them to do more. They
work?
love the team. Like they love the team. They're, they're friends.
Yeah.
But they're not, it's not like if they're, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be saying that. Like, I feel like they should be working more, 7 and 10.
Yeah.
But I've had them help out, like,
Yeah.
like, hey, clean this, here's a towel, here's a spray, do this. But it doesn't seem like that they're that into it. I don't know if they're still
They
too
don't
young
like, try
or what.
cooking anything with you?
No. Occasionally, they'll hang out on the line and be like, "Oh, how does this work?" or "How does that work?" But they lose interest pretty fast. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see.
Kids only
They're
have
still
like
too young.
a 10 to 15 second ability to focus these days.
My kids do the same thing. They're like, I want to be a musician too. I'm like, cool, here's the guitar. And they're like, all right, cool. And I'm like, all right, so you
Yeah,
play
I
this
have
chord.
a-
And they're like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
No,
A
I'm outta
drum
here.
set that's like been used 5 times.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to add to that, for what it's worth, I spent a lot of time at my mom's restaurant, and I didn't show the interest in it at like close to that age, right, of 7 and 10. I didn't, I wasn't jumping in on things, but here I am now, right, like,
Yeah.
30 years later, and this is my life, and this is my
Yeah.
passion, and I'm crazy about it. So you never know.
Yeah. Right.
Going back to you in the restaurant, I know that you spent a lot of time not only just in the restaurant growing up, but also working there even at an early age. But I can't help but think that it wasn't until you decided to go down to Mexico and study and train with Susan Trilling that really was like a big step in your professional career. And I just wanted to know, like, what are some valuable lessons? I guess first of all, what was it like going down there at a young age to take this big step in your career? And then what are some valuable lessons that you learned down there and that you carry with you today?
When I think I was 20 or 21 when I went down there, and I think it was
For the first time?
to Oaxaca.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to Oaxaca, where Susana Trilling is. It was the first year that she had opened up her school, and I had taken some classes there. I really loved it. It was beautiful. Met another great chef that I was actually super happy to see nominated also for James Beard. She used to have this gorgeous restaurant called El Naranjo in Oaxaca, and I wonder if she knows how much like I valued my time with her. I remember we hit it off really well, where even when my mom came to visit, like we would like have dinner together at her restaurant, Ileana de la Vega. But at the time, I want to say I was like 17 when I had this sort of magical moment that I wanted to be a chef. And I never had that moment when I was in Mexico, even at that time, as gorgeous as it was, that I'm like, oh, I want to cook Mexican food, or like I want to be a Mexican chef. I didn't have that until way later. So, I mean, I was just kind of, I feel like I very much felt like I had so much to learn and I didn't know anything that I was just kind of taking the experience in. And it wasn't until way later when I did have that moment where I knew I only wanted to dedicate my life to Mexican cuisine that I like felt like if I was going back in time and putting myself back in all of those floods of memories all throughout my life and my time in Mexico. So at the time I was just experiencing. I mean, I loved it and I was just open to experience. But I wasn't like, oh, this is what I want to do, which I always kind of like thought that was like weird, I guess. But nonetheless, that's what happened.
Yeah. Is there anything still that you carry with you today that you like fondly remember of that school? And
I would say 100% the fact. So this was like, it was her home was still under construction, but the kitchen was just gorgeous. I mean, the kitchen was beautifully old world kitchen, old world. And all of her assistants were Zapotecas. So all the Zapoteca women would help us do moles, and they showed us how to make real chocolate from cacao with metates. And so my time with the Zapotecas, I would say, is what I've, valued the most when I was there.
What is Zapoteca?
So it's a indigenous tribe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the Zapotecos. Yeah, and they were just incredibly strong women. It's just funny the way, the things that they were doing were just like, I do this because my mother showed me, because my mother showed me, because her mother showed her, because her, so just like passed down from generation to generation to generation. And I think that's now when you fast forward now, well, Oaxaca's actually been doing this for a good amount now, but, they were really, it is the state where people have embraced the indigenous culture and groups of people and been trying to save the languages and recipes and the rituals, and because you could lose it, and that would be a shame. So they're doing a lot for that. And I hope I want Mexico to do more, to structureize their cuisine.
Yeah, I just want to add that I love what you said there, because the preservation of culture is such an important part of what we do even today. All of us, right, in our restaurants, but more so, just I don't see it happening as much as maybe I'd like for it to be, and I think it's important, and it's very cool that. Maybe in this particular region, right there, that is a focus, as opposed to like some other countries are just kind to assimilate and, kind of adapt to what's happening. So it's very cool, and it's a very beautiful story.
Is Oaxaca, would you say, a huge influence on your cuisine today, Ami Tocaya?
Oh, every time that I make moles, I always make them in Oaxacan style, because that's where I learned how to make moles, and that's what, so yeah, that always stays with me. Every time I've made mole, I've made all the 7 moles all throughout my life. I feel like I'm only getting better and better and better at it. And, although I was shown 1 or 2 times, it's funny because you keep understanding more and more and more.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're there or not, like you kind of get more intuitive, and they sort of open up to you, and you get to, like, every time I make mole, I feel like it's my best batch, every year that I do this mole or that one, like the 7 moles of Oaxaca. So with those, I always do it in Oaxaca. So I feel like, it's always going to have a special part in the food that I make.
Can we explain just to listeners out there that may not be familiar with mole? So what is it, and what are like the varying styles of them?
So mole comes from the word moi in not wheat, and really it just means a mixture of many ingredients. And I like to kind of explain this in a way where, you have to take a look at Mexico in a geographical sense of what they grow agriculturally is so incredibly rich. And that's why you do see a lot of moles that have so many ingredients because, when you have all of these food all around you and you don't want to be wasteful and you want to incorporate all of this, it really is a mixture and a balance that women have made to make a sauce called mole. So you have different moles all over the country. And there's mole negro, mole amarillo, mole verde, but depending where you are, I mean, everywhere you're going to find different variations. So that's why I always say that the moles that I make are from like Oaxaca because that's the way I was shown. I've never been shown, my family never really made mole. They would buy the paste and reconstitute it. They never really made it from scratch.
Oh, okay.
You would go to the markets and they'll sell the paste and you reconstitute it with a stock, and that's how, mole would always be delicious, but, it wouldn't make it from scratch. I mean, it's a huge process.
Yeah.
So that's really what mole is. When the earth gives you so much and you don't want to, you're forced to, you have to paint with all of these ingredients.
Yeah.
That's why you have nuts and seeds and fruit and chiles and preserved chiles, preserved fruit, so it's really just a balance of all of these beautiful things that you get.
I love that.
That's very much just like hearing you talk about it. It's very much like a lot of Korean cuisine, like the way that, like my mother, her sisters, my grandmother, like the way they cooked was very much like that. It's you eat off the land, right, and you use it all. You don't fucking waste anything,
Yeah.
right? But so yeah, I love the parallels between your cuisine, Mexican cuisine, and what we do. So I wanted to kind of ask you, have you run into any issues with people questioning the authenticity of your food?
Yeah, all the time. I feel like something that's kind of helped in that regard, which obviously I'll take it. I think it's great, but something that's helped majorly is because once these huge publications like Food and Wine or Bon Appetit took notice of me, Tocaya, and started talking about our cuisine, then I feel like then other people started taking it more seriously. Okay. I feel like, what are those writers? Publications that are like, like Chicago Reader.
Yeah.
I feel like those writers have always been super intuitive and really great, I feel like, with the kind of food that I've done. And other larger ones here in Chicago, here's looking at you, Trib, was not. Like I always felt like, how the hell are you going to come here and talking about, like Mexican food when you don't know shit about it?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that I feel like it's probably gotten better.
Yeah.
A lot better now.
Yeah.
But I remember being furious about reading
100%.
reviews of somebody who doesn't know anything about, and I don't know. And so like until Bon Appetit or like Food and Wine really kind of dove in. That's why I'm really thankful for that, because I feel like before when we first opened Mi Tocaya, it was like, I don't care if you raise the chicken yourself, $4 for a taco. And it's just like, what ignorance, like, it's like, really?
Yeah.
I have a next door neighbor who is selling, subs and chips and stuff. And their chips are, $2 fucking for an ounce of chips.
Yeah.
For sure.
But you want to, like, I just feel like you need to have a little bit of perspective,
Right.
Like it's really like, and that was at the time, like 2017, $4 for a taco. I mean, we were beer cans smoking them, We had like lime mayonesa. We had, slaw. We had epazote, salsa de choconosle. Like, do you know how much work
Homemade tortillas.
that is? Like, that's so much labor, work, ingredients.
Yeah.
But then you could buy a sandwich and a bag of chips for $15, and you're not gonna like. It's like, really, like, how can you put a price on? I don't know.
I mean, just the fact that if you taste Diana's food, like your tacos, your tortillas, they're
incredible.
They're incredible. Like
Thanks, guys.
I can't stop. I can't stop thinking about them. Can't stop talking about them. I just wanted to put that out there.
I have to just add to this, and I feel like we both deal with the same problem. But I and just hearing you, I can imagine the challenge. I almost want to say, like, I feel maybe a little fortunate that Western palates, Korean food is still so very new to a lot of Western palates, right? Whereas I think the idea of Mexican food, right? There a lot of people thinking of, I know Mexican food, right? Because it's been way more prevalent than maybe like something as like Korean food. And I think that people come in with this idea of this authority of saying, oh, I know what Mexican food is, right? And
Yeah,
like,
because you vacation there,
Right.
like, is not,
that.
and where, like, hey, I get it. I mean, Mexican
Right.
food is great, and I want everybody to love it. It makes me feel very happy about that, But I mean, I think that there is a really big difference. That's like, or I mean, like, oh, well, I have a couple of Mexican friends. It's like,
Right.
that's great. That still doesn't mean that's like I have a lot of white, just American friends.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they know shit about American food.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that does
1,000,000%.
not mean, like, does that mean that I get to turn around and be like, is this apple pie good?
Yeah.
Like, or is this like, it's
Right.
just not. So I feel like I don't mean to, and it's always one of those things. Like, I don't mean to sound mean or anything. I just really want people to kind of understand
Yeah,
sort
100%.
of where people are coming from.
Yeah.
Like, I say it all the time. I feel like a lot of people love Mexican food, but don't know anything about it. 100%. And this isn't including Mexicans. I mean, this is not something, it is what it is.
Right.
We have a recurring theme on this show. it's complaining about how people don't understand what we do, and it's that they undervalue our food. They undervalue our culture. They undervalue just who we are because it isn't, the usual American person serving this food to you. Therefore, it's worth less,
Right.
And it is something that it's a big problem, and we constantly. Luckily, I'm in the back, so I don't worry about it as much. But Tom is constantly having to, and we're happy to educate, our guests about why it is the price that it is. You're in downtown Chicago, motherfucker. Like, yeah, you're gonna pay for this shit, So I would
called rent.
definitely, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I think there's just a big disconnect from people that it stems from the fact that like a lot of people aren't cooking at home, so things are just so quick, readily available, microwavable, and when you don't put in that labor of love and understand the time it takes, time being the ingredient and the cost of things that are incredibly delicious, and I think when that doesn't connect with people, they will never understand that this vegetable was treated with love for hours and hours on end before it made it to your plate in front of you on your table. So,
I mean, that's like in our restaurant, sauces take sometimes a couple days to
Right.
make, because it's a process, like almost everything on our menu takes days to make, there's and that's that we're obviously professional cooks, like it takes days to do this. Like and I'm really like now I think things have been changing, and I don't want to sound like if I'm complaining because we have so much support from so many people, and we're really thankful for it. So I don't want to sound like if I'm being a hater, like, oh, how dare you, or blah blah blah, like but I mean, it is in general, like I think it is something the conversation needs to continue.
I think that dialogue will always need to
Yeah.
continue, and there is always a lack of understanding and a lack of perspective with a lot of people in the world, and yeah, that's I stand with you 100% on that. So.
Absolutely. And I think it's, I also love the fact that I think I read somewhere that you refuse to use English or French or certain terms for,
Spanglish only, baby. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, because the way I looked at it was always that, and listen, I've worked in only pretty much European kitchens, and there's always terminology that you don't know, you don't know what this is. You learn what it is, there's been plenty of, chefs that tell me I'm like, Rosolo, que chingados es eso, and then they tell you what it is, or things that you don't know how to pronounce, things that you don't know what they mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And when you put that on a menu, nobody's tripping about the fact that they don't put an English word to that, or that they don't know what it is,
Sure.
But somehow with Spanish, I found that very much being well, how am I supposed to read this menu? It's in Spanish.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
well, it's in Spanglish,
Yeah.
but that's why, we spent an incredibly lot amount of time, serving at Mi Tocaya is hard, for many reasons, but one of the major ones is also that's quite different is because you really need to learn about Mexican culture and Mexican, the history of birth of Mexican food, pre-Hispanic food, and you're learning all of these things, and then on top of it, we're not just recreating a recipe, I want to make it into my own, so I always say that we're sort of like a licuadora of traditions, but we always do something that's based and grounded on the actual paying homage to what something is, and I feel like they get so much, they have to know, and there's a lot of things that they just didn't know, because it in Mexico people use words like ragu, I don't want to use words like ragu. I didn't want to use things like all sorts of things like that, and then also because there's all sorts of different techniques and words that don't get used. Why? Because you're scared that it's not going to be embraced, or because people cannot pronounce it. It's what it is. Why are we going to I feel like it happens all the time. It's I don't want to change what this is because it may be difficult to and
some words don't translate well either, right? Even in our language, right, or not, I speak English, but in Korean, there are words that it's we use eight sentences to describe one word, in order to translate it properly. So that makes complete sense, right? It's not as easy as this means that, right?
Yeah.
And we do that at Perla as well, right? Tom, when he drops off the food, this is pajon, and he stares at you. but it's it's a scallion pancake, right? And it's it's in front of you. You know what you ordered, and I don't know. I love that aspect of it, and it's speaking the language is a sense of pride too, and I love that about the experience at your place as well. As soon as we walk in, it's you walk into almost your little universe, and it was just such a beautiful experience.
Yeah, and there's levels to this. There are so many levels to this shit, because when you think about it too, I found most of our staff, we're 95% Latino, and a lot of that portion is Mexican. And what I find also is that everybody has that's sort of the beauty of this sort of landscape of what is being Latino, it's we all have so many different similarities because of, at the end of the day, we were all conquered by the same, but again, it's the movement of people and geography. What really unites us is that, that's why we speak Spanish, that's why all of these places are Christian, so I feel I find it really liberating. I've seen that it was quite liberating for everybody who past and present who have worked at the restaurant, who are Latinos, who were they would only be able to speak Spanish at the home, or sometimes their parents would tell them, no, you have to learn English. It has to be perfect. And so I've seen it all the time happen when people work at Mi Tocaya. We it feels really great to sort of visit your heritage and be like, you know what, I've never spoke so much Spanish and embraced it before. And then also it pushes you to speak more, because sure, you could understand it, and you could speak enough, obviously, to like be, but then, you know, it's very different to speak it on a whole different level. Like, yes, maybe you could speak home Spanish, but do you know how to speak it in a manner of a professional level to a guest? Or also, how do you translate? Well, I never knew that. You know, like somebody would be like, I didn't know what tuétano was. You know, like, oh, well, it's bone marrow. You know, like things like that they had no idea how to translate that, because, you know, it's whether you're first generation here or you came here at a young age or you came here later, you always are going to adopt, you know, the existing culture and cultures of where you're at. So I feel like it's also been such a great thing to see. Everybody's young. I mean, 99% of everybody at the restaurant is like, I think their collective age is like 26. Yeah. And so it's really nice to see like them being empowered by their culture.
I love that.
And being like, yes, like I love that I'm like taking that jump again to speak Spanish, and then not just, you know, with the guests, but, you know, I push them to do it within each other, you know? And so I feel like that's always really great to because everybody always wants to know who they are, right? Yeah. And I feel like that is always going to be a piece of you, you know, whatever heritage that you may have, your roots. It's always helps you find out a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think so. Brian, our sous chef, before he started, he's a very talented cook. He has cooked at a lot of, you know, well-known restaurants here in the city, and he had a lot of opportunity before he joined us. But something he told me that still I think about is, he's like, all the places are great. They definitely offered him more money and benefits, but he's like, I belong here. This is what I should be doing.
Right.
So that's very much what you're talking about.
One of our front of house says the same thing. She's just like, I live my life every day, but I'm always surrounded by the most Koreans in my life when I'm here at work. And she says that's just like a special thing. So I love that you're offering that space for your team. And you know, a lot of what Andy was touching on earlier about why I drop dishes in Korean before I say the English word is because even as a consumer myself, like, I love that aspect of dining out, especially if it's, you know, a different cuisine that I'm not familiar with. Like when we were at your restaurant, I love that aspect of learning about something while I'm there. I'm not just getting fed a plate of food. I'm getting fed, you know, knowledge and information, and like I'm being open to a new perspective and a new culture.
Experience.
It is a full experience, absolutely. Yeah. And I hope that continues. And I think it's a shame that like French and Italian is romanticized and praised, where Asian languages or Spanish is being like pushed down, and you know, it's being demanded that it be more Americanized or something like that. And I hope that continues to change, because I know
well,
that
that's what we're doing. We're doing the work, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that something that, you know, some of the culture that you have in your restaurant now, is any of that instilled in you from your parents' restaurants growing up? Do you feel connected there in any way?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I feel like my parents were always, they were always sort of like the black sheep of their family. You know, my dad didn't want to study, came from a large family, didn't want to study, so they kicked him out of the house, and he was sort of this like, you know, rebel on a motorcycle. I love that. Coming here to Chicago, you know, and you know, he snagged his wife, who was a dental school dropout, my mom, who was like, I don't want to study all this. This is too much work. You know, at the end, you know, like she was always just, I mean, my mom's an artist. You know, she paints,
I love that.
Paints, writes, and draws. She's always been very artistically inclined. And my dad is somebody who's always always works with his hands. And so, and then living the life to them has always been like, yeah, just going out. They're quite eccentric, actually. Like, you know, we would have like extravaganzas where we'd be like, maybe that's why I feel like sometimes I'm so terrible with money because you know, they've definitely instilled like being open to new experiences, to listen, to really use your five senses, you know, when you're touching something, when you're listening to something, music, restaurants they would love to eat. I mean, going to a restaurant when done right is a form of theater. It really much is, you know, like I tell our servers all the time that they're really guides, you know, like they're not only guides for the experience, but then they're also, you know, people who are, they're hosts for, you know, this adventure, and they have to be able to connect to every guest that goes in there, you know, like you're not going to be the same person for every person, you know, because every person who walks in is great, you know, like is totally different, totally different. So, you know, it's always actually been one of my favorite things that Anthony Bourdain wrote, that, you know, nowhere, there's not another industry where, you know, so many people from different walks of life, financially, economically, culturally, will be together than in a restaurant, you know, and I feel like that's probably the thing that has drawn me so much to restaurants, because it's not just, you know, like there's so many things that you could be being a chef, you know, like there's, especially now, which has been like something through the pandemic, you know, like before I feel like, oh, if you want to be a chef, you're going to be a chef at a restaurant and you're going to, right? Like now that is not the case at all. I mean, people are doing so much with being, which I think is great, you know. I'm one of those suckers who still wants to be in a restaurant because, you know, it's like, I feel like it's one of those hopelessly in love things, you know. I just love that sense of theater, and every single day putting on that show, which is super, super hard. But I mean, it's magical. It really is.
I love that you say that.
I also want to hang with your parents, by the way.
Oh my God.
The way you just described them, I'm like, I want to hang with these
People
guys.
who know them, for sure.
100%.
They're nuts.
I love that. I want to kind of dive into this idea. It's something we've talked about in the past, and it's this concept of third culture. It's often brought up in a lot of conversation, you know, in my circles, and it's just this not being accepted, you know, at home in Korea, and then not being accepted here as an American, right? It's this constant limbo that we float in, this in-between space. And, you know, I heard you speak on this before, and I just wanted to see, like, how does this, you know, and how did it impact you as a young adult? You know, even as a child going back to Mexico in the summers, and is that something that you carry with you today, even as a professional chef?
I feel like for the first time, I don't feel so much that way. I don't know if before, I mean, again, it's that with that sense of wanting to belong, right? But yeah, I mean, I 100% always felt like that. I mean, we really don't have much family here in the States, especially in Chicago, and so we would spend our summers in Mexico with our family there, and so I mean pretty much every summer, and so it was always one of those things where, you know, it's totally different. It's totally different, and you know, I also sort of acknowledge too that, you know, my family in Mexico is middle class, which is a very small middle class in Mexico, and you know, the sort of privileges of that, and so I know that my experience is very different because of that, you know, and so I feel like it's always changed. It's always been one of those things where you feel, for many reasons, I always felt like me here, I would always feel like I didn't sort of belong in any sort of real group, you know, like, in every sort of kind of school social setting, it would always be like, okay, well, the minority kids hang out with the minority kids. Like it wouldn't fail every time, you know, because it would be predominantly white, and then, well, the Latinos and the Black kids would hang out together, and the Asians would hang out together. And so, like, and, you know, I feel like that was a different group and to begin with, you know, like, because, and so I've always felt like that, you know, well, I had always felt like that for so many reasons, you know, like, I think that there is a huge stereotype that people think that, you know, being Mexican means that you're, you know, have to be dark skinned and have to be like, it's colorism, right? And, you know, which I never really understood that, because I feel like a lot of, like, you know, novelas are like prime time everywhere. Like, it's like you could see the spectrum clearly, you know. But I mean, it's just from a lack of understanding. When you have the people who are migrating to Mexico are obviously not migrating because not migrating because they have it so well off in their country. It's because of they have it so poorly in their country. You know, it's a lot of rural and pueblo people coming because of a lack of resources by their government and by, you know, I mean, it's a long history of that. And so, you know, I feel, and also, like, I mean, I've seen that with my parents having restaurants, you know, a lot of throughout these years, like, like having usually education for a lot of these rural places, you know, stops at 4th and 5th grade, you know, and that's just crazy, you know, like, that's just really crazy. And I feel like when you come here, it starts morphing into something else, you know, like, again, it's like this different subculture. And yeah, I've always kind of felt like if people were like, oh, okay, well, you're not American, you're Mexican. But then I felt plenty of times with other Mexican kids that were first or second generation that, you know, and mind you, like, they may not even speak Spanish or have ever even been to Mexico or have even, like, and it's no fault of their own, you know, but, like, would tell me that you're not Mexican, you're too light-skinned, you know what I mean? Like, and that's just, like, again, it's just plain just, it's ignorance, right? Like, you just don't know, you know, like, and you're saying these things, you know? So it's like, you know, not everybody's experience is the same as yours, you know. And then when I would go to Mexico, they would always be like, "Oh, tu prima la americana," you know, like they would call me, you know, they wouldn't call me Mexican, they'd call me American, you know. And being the snotty American that we are, you know, like, I would always, like, especially older in, like, high school, like, I would ask, like, questions like, well, why do you do this? Like, this is like, and they're just like, calm down, American, like, calm down. It's because you don't get the way we do things here. You pay them off, and that's that, you know? like, what do you mean, females? I mean, in so many things, you know, I'd be like, well, why aren't, like, if I very much saw that women still were going off and getting education still just to get married because it looks good on paper for being a wife. You know, like, I've seen that plenty of times, you know, and it's just like, that reminds me of that one movie with Julia Roberts, right? When they're like Kristen Dunst, Julia Roberts, so a lot of people in that movie, but, like, you know, I think it was like in the 50s, you know, of like what the college scene, university scene was in high education. Oh, man.
Is that Eat, Pray, Love?
No.
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 Mona Lisa Smile?
Yes.
Thanks, Angela.
You know, and it, like, told him, like, yeah, this is some 1950s bullshit right here, you know? And then, like, my cousins, you know, my guy cousins, 3 in particular, they're like my brothers, you know, like, we literally have grown up together. They would always just be like, cálmate. Just be like, cálmate, güey. Cálmate. Aquí no es Chicago, okay? Just be like, so, like, same thing, you know, like, you're always, you know, there's always this way of, like, where you feel like you don't belong. I don't know if, like, maybe you get more comfortable in your skin as you grow more weathered and older and wiser, like myself. But, you know, it's something that I definitely have shed off with, honestly, with, I feel like, self-education and talking to people who are incredibly much smarter than me and educated, and a sense of everybody feels this sort of way in any kind of aspect. Like I think that you just have to be open and try to be as learned as possible and feel confident in what you do to contribute into a larger, more positive way. So I don't feel like that anymore. Now I'm Mexican American, and for as much as I love and my profession, like my work is very much, 100% inspired by my heritage in Mexico. I'm American before that, and I feel like with that, I want to excel at that,
For sure.
I love that.
I don't want to be one of those people who complain like, oh, this, like, I feel like people who, like, I've seen this so many times that just like complain and complain and complain about this country really have never spent any time in any other country. Therefore, it might be a little like, like it's like you have to understand.
It's gratitude.
Right? Yeah, and there's nowhere else in this world where you can do what you could do here,
For sure.
and so for that, I do very much appreciate the opportunities that I have had here, because of that.
Absolutely.
So I have an interesting question. Might be a little bit touchy, but just coming up in kitchens, right? I know personally, I ran into a lot of kind of, the racial slurs and stereotypical kind of insults and just kind of being the butt of the joke. And I recall even today just like keeping my mouth shut and just accepting it. And, because that's how, at least in my culture, we're raised, is keep your head down and just keep working, and eventually you will rise, But I was wondering if you, as a person of color and a woman in this industry, especially because everyone knows, 10, 20 years ago, it was not the way it was today. You have any experiences like that kind of impacted who you are?
The short answer is yes.
Do you mind touching on any of those?
Yes, and just like with a lot, actually, I feel like there's layers of this too. I feel like when I first wanted to be a chef and started working in this industry, I was incredibly naive and had didn't have any sort of I also had, parents who were incredibly supportive. So it was never a thing of that I was a woman. I never felt that way to begin with initially, because, I was completely supported by not only my parents. When I told my parents, they were just like, oh my God, why didn't we think of that? It's perfect, Diana, perfect, and they got so excited when all the time, I didn't want to tell them because I thought they were going to be like, you're just saying that because you're always at the restaurant or that's not a real job, and so in my family in Mexico also were incredibly supportive. And so I didn't feel like that initially, I think just because I was blinded by love and ambition, which is not a bad thing at all.
Love that.
So, and then, honestly too, because I feel like I had talent, I was ambitious and hardworking and knew what I wanted. And very much, first kitchens that I worked at, I think that, when you work, if somebody is not acknowledging or does not care, normally that means that maybe you should find somewhere else to work at, right? But I didn't feel that way. The chefs that I had very much noticed and very much, as a chef now, wouldn't you guys agree? When you guys see that sort of eye of the tiger in any of your, young cooks, it's a turn on. You're like, that's awesome. Like
Yeah.
you love that because it ups everybody's game. Like, and so in that regard too, like I also felt really good. Did I feel it with other fellow cooks? Sometimes, yeah, like sometimes very much, they would. I remember a couple of times, cooks being like, some of the senior cooks sort of being like, talking shit or like purposely would not like talk to me or ask me to hang out afterwards. Not that I wanted to hang out with their asses anyway. It's like, who the fuck? I got my own friends, okay? I'm not trying to hang out with you guys. I like spend all day with you, okay? I got my own people. But like, like I was just like, psh, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but like they would be like petty like that, or like be like, oh, like, it's just like I had enough work and enough to do where I just really didn't care.
Yeah.
And I could hear them running their mouths. Like there'd be like, they would like spread rumors as like, oh, it's probably because, she's giving it up to chef or something. Like, like that kind of shit, like that kind of sexual innuendos kind of bullshit,
Wow.
And, I just didn't, I guess I just never, I didn't let that bother me. And I guess, again, I was sort of like, was just like put my head down and work, and I knew what I wanted to do, and that was it, and I'm not saying that did work for a while. And then when I got to, it was when I left, but in general in Chicago, it was more, if you're good, you're good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're good, you're good. Like people come around. When I moved to DC, it was terrible.
Oh, man.
Terrible.
Why is
Never,
that?
ever. I mean, it was just, women were just not treated the same at all. It was incredibly hard finding a sous chef position. It was incredibly harder to find an executive chef position. And I completely feel like I did not get treated seriously or fairly until I actually got the executive chef position that I got. And lo and behold, it's by like an OG punk rocker woman who's open, who has a restaurant, So like, yeah, I wonder how that happened, like it's like nobody else seemed interested.
Yeah.
And so, it was really hard. Like, I feel like people just completely did not, it was such a boys club. I mean, and this is, so one, I had my first sort of struggle in your face in DC as a sous chef working there with, as far as sexism. And it really, I don't know, like, so, when I was new, it was my first sous chef position there in DC. And, I just come in guns blazing. And there was a lot of, there's not a lot of Mexican, a huge Mexican population, a huge Central American, a lot of Salvadorians, people from Honduras. And so, like, I just totally thought that they would be like, woohoo, these guys are going to love me. They're going to be like, so cool to have a fellow Latina here. Like, cool, and then also, especially because, like, I was like a workhorse, I'm
what
the
you
shit
can
as a
bring.
line cook,
Yeah.
Say this all the time. My line cook skills are the best.
Fuck yeah.
Like I'm just like, yeah, like, and I tend not to be scared for anything, like, and so like, I just figured like everything's going to randomly work out for me. And they were like, oh, hold up. No.
Oh, no.
And so like, when I would tell people like, okay, like this, like, you have to tell people what to do. And I would find that like, at first it was sort of kind of subtle where they're just like,
Resistant.
you're saying it, but nobody's really listening.
Yeah.
And then so like I'd have to be like, hey, did you not hear me? Like, we got to get X, Y, and Z done. Like, I'm going to work this station today. Like, you could do this. Like, we're going to send you home today early, like, and, I just literally still remember this guy, like, he was just like, we're not going to do what you say. Like, you think that we're going to listen to what a woman says?
Oh my God.
Like that, just like blunt in your face. Like, that's why, I mean, like, And at first, I completely was just like hearing that. Like I just felt like just completely melted.
Yeah.
You know, like all of that complete surprise element. You know, complete surprise element. Like just totally felt like I melted. Like I could feel the sort of tears coming up, you know, and not that I was ashamed of crying. Like I've always been a very emotional person. I cry all the fucking time. But you know, this was a different cry. You know, this was like a different cry I never had before.
Yeah.
And so like I run into the walk-in, you know, don't ask me why, but I had service there and I called my mom, you know, like, and I'm just like, Mami, no me están haciendo caso. Like, just like completely whimpering. And I've done this a couple of times to my mom, you know, and she always, even, you know, thousands of miles away, she manages to give me a fucking smack in my face and just be like, you really thought that they were going to listen to you? Like, you know, like they have to, right? What's your job? Like they have to. You just go in there and you tell them if they don't like it, they could leave.
Yeah. I love that.
You know, like that's, she's like, do you feel confident in what you're doing? Are you doing what your job is supposed to be doing? She's like, no te dejes. And so.
What is that?
No te dejes is like, don't be gotten. Like don't let somebody, you know what I mean?
Don't let them get to you, yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And so I like go in there after my pep talk. I'm like, all right. And I do, you know, I step to this guy, you know, I'm just like, yo, this is what it's going to be. Like, if you don't like it, then you could go home and then we could talk about it tomorrow. You know, like the chef wasn't in. I'm like, you could go home and then we could talk about it tomorrow. We could sit down and, you know, we could find out what's good, you know? And he was just like, looked at me and he's like, I'm not going to listen to you, blah, 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 you know? And then I knew I was not going to get anywhere. And in this place, I actually shout out to Ashok Bajaj. I mean, he owns like, I don't know how many restaurants now in DC, but Knightsbridge. And he was actually somebody who, as far as like all the sexist stuff that happened, him being the owner, he would go to every single one of his restaurants multiple times. And he did actually take a huge liking and to me and like really took me under his wing and showing me numbers and spreadsheets, things that I literally have used this to this day. And so like I actually called him and I'm just like, hey, because he actually worked at other restaurants of his. I'm like, I'm having this problem with him. And he had 100% my back and he had to show up and he was like, get out of here.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah.
And then of course he started threatening me. He started calling, threatening me. So then, you know, I got to call my boyfriend. You know, my boyfriend is from my boyfriend, you know, no, at that point he's my husband.
Yeah.
So like, you know, my husband's from Chicago. You're not gonna talk to my lady like that.
Oh.
And so like I call my husband. I'm like, hey, this guy says that he's gonna pull up like when I in the alley because that's where you exit, you know. So of course, Joe, El Gallo Blanco Pechungis shows up, you know, and he's just like, what's going to happen? So, you know, like, shout out to these men in my life, you know, like, but my husband and the owner, they're just like, nothing's going to happen. Don't be scared, you know, like, but yeah, he was out there with his decked out car, blasting his music, waiting.
My God.
Yeah, waiting.
Jesus.
And so like I'm scared as hell, but I like walk out like you know, like get in my car and you know dip. But yeah.
Wow.
And then you know there was a lot of things leading up to that, but that was like the sort of explosive thing. And I think also that you know, at the time I didn't understand. Again, like later on now as I look back, I understand why. I mean, I totally want all of those males their respect, and we still keep in touch to this day on social media. And, you know, I think that you have to understand where people come from. You know, like I didn't know anything about El Salvador. I didn't know anything about Honduras when I was there. Like it wasn't until years later I found out sort of like the sort of situation and why there was such a large population of Central Americans there and the sort of things that they were going through. And, it doesn't surprise me at all why they would treat women like this. It's part of
Their culture.
it was part of their habitual sort of like, it's what they see. And like a lot of the things that they have gone through, I know that like some of these males like would tell me some of the things that would happen to them and happen. And it's just so terrible, and it's so funny how you could love and hate somebody at the same time, because I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but like at that time too, again, I had that sort of mentality where like you sort of, and I feel so bad. Like this is something that I do regret a lot. Like there's been times in my life where I should have been more of a friend and understanding to my fellow, sisters, because I always was so sort of just, I don't know if I just wasn't seeing, like, how like you could see something, but at the same time, I don't know if because I was just like, if I had blinders, like I swear I don't feel like if I was doing this on purpose in a way that was, and I'm not saying that to like absolve myself of like sort of guilt. I mean, I feel regret, not guilt, but there's been plenty of things where like, here in Chicago, I know I should have stuck up for, I have a pretty strong personality, and I feel like and I've grown up with men, and I feel like maybe that has sort of helped me a lot in sort of being
fierce.
Which is funny enough because I'm going through some like hormonal stuff, and it turns out I have very low testosterone. I'm like, really? I'm like, really? I'm like, okay. So I feel like I've been able to sort of, I don't know, I may have not been prone to a lot of that sort of that because of that, and then, but I've seen plenty of times where I feel like I should have said something. I look back, it was like pretty much during like the Me Too movement where I'm just like, I really started to go back into my head and take a look at the women who I had worked with and what their experiences might have been like. And that's when I'm just like, holy shit. Yeah. And then including in DC, like, again, how I don't know how I could, it's funny how you could have a love-hate relationship. Those same males that ended up being such great, I mean, they really looked out for me. Any place that I worked at before, when I was like, had an executive chef position, I'd be like, hey, can you help me? They're like, yes. Like they watched out for me in a huge way, but they also, remembering back, they also treated women so terribly. Like I had two spectacular women cooks there, and I remember, this is so terrible, like one of them telling me that, and I don't know why I'm saying this to you guys, but I mean, I think it's just because, life happens, and sometimes you don't have, I don't know if it's the capacity or what, but I didn't fucking know, what to do. I don't know why I didn't.
That's okay too. I think it's.
But this motherfucker took her to the bathroom because the bathroom was in the back, and like pulled down his pants on her.
Jesus.
And I was just, and she told me like maybe a couple weeks later, because I could just notice that she was not like hanging out, like talking, self, and then like, I don't know. I wish I would have. I mean, I know I spoke to him, but that I should have done more. I should have most definitely done more, and that happened a handful of times there. That I always feel really, regret, and I guess why I'm saying it, and I am so open about this, is that because I'm sure that there's plenty of other sisters out there who like completely. It's hard. We're still not in managerial positions. Like, I'm sorry, but we're not. Like, the number one question that I would always get is, how do I feel being in a position that I'm going to have to manage men? And at the time I thought it was a normal question. I didn't know until much later that I'm like, wait a minute, that is a fucked up question to ask me, for sure. And that's just one, so, and the reason why I have my own restaurant, I never wanted my own business because I saw what happened to my parents and how It was a huge strain on their marriage. It was a strain on our family. And I'm like, I want to be part of a group, but, I don't feel like that people were taking me seriously like that, and I'm like, you know what? I have 2 children. I have a husband. I know how hard I work. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be one of these fucking puppets that they're like chef owner. Like, let's keep it real. You're not the chef owner. That's something that they're using as a marketing technique. Do you ever see their fucking profits? Do you ever see their books? Do you really know what you're, it's just like, we need to stop that, chefs work so incredibly hard, so many hours. And I could only, that's why I was like, this is why I'm going to open up our own place, this is why we're going to do our own place, because at least here I can have my kids come here. Yeah. Here I could, my husband and I could be together. We could have something that we both are super passionate about, that we both love, and so that's why we did it, because there was a huge lack of opportunities. I mean, you take a look at the women chefs that we have in the city right now.
Yeah. No,
what do you see? Actual owners.
Yeah, chef owners for sure.
Yeah. Why do you think that is,
This is all very, very sad but true. This is the unfortunate current state of events state of the industry.
Right.
But do you have words of encouragement or something that you can say now that you have gone through those things and experienced, just different levels of harassment and whatnot to sisters out there?
I think now, for sure, it's one of those things where now there's so many different groups. There's a lot of, I know here in just a network of Chicago, I'm actually going to meet up with some of my lady chef friends tonight. And, I think we're a great group of people who have sort of experienced a lot. We all actually happen to be women of color. And in social media, I feel like you could reach out whenever you have a question or reach out to a woman chef that you think that may have. I'm always, I handle all of our social media and, I'm always there. So I feel like reaching out to different women's groups, to women chefs would be a huge help. I mean, I remember one of the major things that I had to go through 2 times was being pregnant, being a chef. I mean, that was just, I didn't find anybody to talk to about that, including my family was like, well, what are you going to do now? You can't be a chef now. And even friends saying that to me, it was, it really sucked, that's why, it's different being a woman chef than a male chef, father, mother, because the roles are so different, and it is, and it's really difficult to be able to do both. And then I find that, if I didn't have this restaurant, I wouldn't be able to do that.
How did you manage that?
I don't fucking know. I mean, I'm still looking for balance. I'm not going to be one of those people that have figured it out. I haven't, I feel like slowly but surely I'm getting better every day. Especially right now, our restaurant's going to be, Tocaya is going to be 5 years old, and I'm really, really proud of it.
Congratulations.
But it's taken 5 years. I feel like this is the best team that we've ever had. It has allowed me to sort of spend more time. In this time, I'm never going to get back with my kids. They're 7 and 10, and I intend to take more time. There's always this, I talk, actually with Beverly, Chef Beverly, we talk about this all the time about almost it's funny because you feel guilty when you're not with your kids, and then you feel guilty when you're not with the restaurant. Because then you're do they think that I don't work a lot? Do they think that I'm not really here? As an owner, you're always Joe and I are always talking about the restaurant and our family. and trying to get it together, trying to get it together. So like we're always working, like, and it's just like, but why do you feel this sort of guilt and this sort of shame? Like, I don't know. So
because you give a shit.
Yeah, I guess, because you care so much.
Yeah.
And it is extremely hard, I feel like, to be a mother especially, but because, children take and need so much of your time. I mean, I'd be lying to be if I wasn't like, oh, it's fine. Like, no, they need a lot of your time. They need, children need their mothers.
Absolutely.
And so this allowed me to be able to be a mother on my terms.
I love that. And, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, those are, these are difficult conversations to have. And, I can tell you just even hearing some of the things that you've gone through and the challenges you've faced, these are hard things for me to even hear, because it's not something, obviously, one, I relate to, and but two, it's just, it sounds horrific, right? And it sounds like these are things that are probably going on, even as we speak, right? It's like these are not problems that are going to get fixed right away, but I think it's important that these conversations take place and the dialogue continues. And I think that there are incredible women out there that are, like yourself, trying to do something great, right? Especially in an industry that's made so hard for them to succeed. And I think that, this kind of conversation needs to be out there in the forefront. And it just simply starts with like awareness and acknowledgement of this problem. And, I commend you for sharing that story and for, giving light to it, because I think it deserves it and it needs it. So,
well, in language too, like I find that, we are habitual people, right? Habitual animals. And I feel like if you spoke a different way in your household, that's the way, or in your, wherever, I mean, you know how it is in Chicago. Like if you grow up with, in certain neighborhoods, like speaking a certain way, like you could always sort of tell like where you're coming from, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's not only that, but it's also just in your home. There's lots of things that I feel that later on I have really understood the connection with language and how we do things. Like I used to say things like, "Oh, don't be a pussy," like, and then I'm like, well, why would that ever be? If that is literally saying that don't be a pussy, being that pussy is weak. It's like, I'm sorry, last time I checked, pussy is not fucking weak. Like it's literally what, where the source of life, the source of life, like literally what all these, heterosexual males are like always trying to get,
right.
Like, and you want to call it a sense of weakness, like, you know what I mean? Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And two, don't put down the pussy.
Yeah.
So like, it's like you got to raise the pussy. You know what I mean? Like you got to praise the pussy. And so like, I feel like these are all just things of like language. And that's just an example.
Right.
Chuck just walked into
And I can tell you.
It took a turn, dude. I just went to the bathroom. I came back. We're talking about pussy. All right, what's up? What's up?
I gotta say that Deanna, that Angeline is strong, stands strong on what you just said, and it's been a conversation that we've had together. And it's like if you're calling someone a pussy, she's like, "Oh, so he's great. He's great.
That
he's
motherfucker's
amazing."
strong as hell.
Were you guys talking about the Betty White quote on that? She has a great quote on that. Where I don't know why you use that to mean like fragile. Like these are very durable. I've had 3 kids.
I love that.
Yes. Well, yes. Like, and that's the thing. That's just like one, right? Like, and I feel like, I'm never coming from a place that where I'm hating males. Like, no, not at all. I love all males and all of my brothers. I mean, I love them. I adore them. Like I love my husband. Like, but I mean, we do have a duty to each other to like also, guys don't know shit about women. They don't, the same way that we don't know much about them, like we're constantly just observing. So we gotta be the ones that are like, hey, that's not okay for you to say that. Like, why are, like, because I mean, something's gonna click and you're gonna be like, you know what? You're right. That's true. I'm not gonna call them that,
Right.
I'm gonna, like, we're creative enough to find different, like, languages. We've definitely learned that in the last 2 years, that language is constantly evolving,
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's those little things too. Like I remember seeing for the first time ever that commercial. Who was it? Was it? I think it was a Tampax commercial. That made me cry so hard, like it was so beautifully done. I don't know why it wasn't fucking everywhere. It was, taking these little girls probably like in their sort of toddler age and being like, oh, what does it mean like to run like a girl? And those sparkles of children that all children have,
Yeah.
Where it's like the world is so gigantic, but so are they. And they're just like so sponging it in, and they're just like, oh, to run as fast as I can,
I remember.
to run as fast as I can, and they're like showing off and bouncing off the wall and like, and then they like go and interview, girls who are, like 13, 12, 10 to like 12 years old, and they're like, oh, what does it mean to like pretty much puberty? I guess now I get the Tampax. Okay, I get it now. These females are about to menstruate. It's a huge part of our lives. Okay.
Yeah.
And they asked them, what does it mean to run like a girl? And they like lost that sort of like, for some reason they think that running like a girl means running like this,
Yeah.
like running really slow,
Yeah.
running not fast enough, and I feel like that was such a powerful display of the language that we give at home, how it affects everyday sort of, and what we're doing to our children.
Yeah.
Like for as much as I've been for a long time, like, oh, women are the most oppressed people of all time. I'm like, children, like from so much through no fault of their own, like we carry, this is why we always carry this baggage with us, like, so, I mean, you don't really have that much of control of where you're going to live or what you're going to do when you're a child, and so, and it's part of your upbringing. So I feel like things like that, language and how we talk to people. I've corrected my husband many times on things like that, but like, as in together, like, it's like, don't call people sweetheart. Like, would you like it if like somebody calls you sweetheart? Like, no, that doesn't like I get, there's just levels to it. It's like, I'm not your honey bunny. Please don't call me sweetheart. Like, I get maybe the intentions could be good. I mean, just opening up the restaurant, people would be like, where's your husband? Where's your father? To me. And I still get it to this day, like it happens all the time. And I'm sure their intentions are good, but like, and I don't feel like being one of those like wild and people who's like, what do you mean? La, da, da. Like, I feel like you got to pick and choose your battles, like you do. But, for all of, I always tell all of the males that we have working at the restaurant all the time about, respecting women, and I think that is such a huge part. I mean, what is it? I remember my husband telling me one time, being like, well, what is it that you think that you could do to help, right? Like, he's like, you're always talking about, like how women are the most oppressed people of all time and this and that. Like, he's like, what do you think that you could do, And he's saying this like in a very bull way. And I'm just like, and I thought about it because at first I'm just like, oh, God damn it. But then I'm like, what I have been doing, if I can take the males that I am by and work with, if I can change the way that they look and speak and treat women, treat their mother, treat their sisters, treat their women friends and their daughters differently, then that will be a huge impact.
Right,
You know,
right.
that will be a huge impact. So there, booyah, there's my answer. He was
Joe.
like, this
Every-
bitch. He's like, damn it.
Yeah, every journey starts with one step.
But
And
yeah,
absolutely.
it's important, you know, like people say that, like, especially with machismo and all of this stuff, like, it's like, oh, mama, I love my mom so much. But then you treat women like garbage.
That's true.
Right.
You know, like, or like, oh yeah, I have this tattoo of the Virgin of Guadalupe. But yet you treat women like trash. It's like, you can't have it both ways, you know, like you can't have it both ways. You know, at some point, you know, yeah, you can't.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely just like a lack of self-awareness, and yeah. Can we, can we
Yes.
shed some light on the Todos Ponen?
Todos.
Oh, yeah.
Todos
Todos
Todos Ponen project.
Yes.
I want to just quickly touch on some of the highlights. You teamed up with a lot of, or many top chefs here in Chicago. You're raising awareness to the lack of COVID-19 relief aid for undocumented restaurant workers, who, if you're in the food and hospitality industry, you know are the backbone of this industry. You also provide free meals for the community, employing undocumented restaurant workers and keeping the supply chain between restaurants and farmers. Can you just maybe share with us how or when you got involved, and how can our listeners learn more?
So Todos Ponen has always been sort of like a slogan that we had here at the restaurant, because I mean, having a small business most definitely is like, you know, we don't have polishers or this or that. Like, you know, it's a lot of work. And so here we're always like, Todos Ponen, meaning that we all pitch into the pot that feeds us, right? We all contribute, we all take from this pot, and we all contribute. And so it also is sort of a thing where like there's no job or that's like too big or too small for somebody to be like, oh, I don't have to do that. You know, it's like we work together as a team.
Is that what it means, the phrase?
Con todo, just, what was it again? Todos Ponen.
Todos Ponen.
Todos Ponen means everybody puts in.
Everybody puts in.
Everybody
I love
puts
that.
in. And so it was always sort of like one of our slogans at the restaurant. And then in 2020, around like November, you know, we just continued to see our sales drop and drop and drop and drop. And it got to a point where, you know, yes, you know, we had to start letting go of people. And there was a lot of people now who, you know, undocumented, who were working 2 jobs, who, you know, so like we, you know, it really hurt to be able to having to cut people's, because there's not, they need to work, they need to pay their bills, you know, and the more you cut, it's like, well, okay, well, we're going to reopen. Well, you know, you can't have your bank account tips where it's dangerously close, right? And so I was just like, well, what could we do to, one, continue to employ the employees who are very important to us, who really like, yeah, because one of the options was closing until patio season opens back up, right? And again, you gotta remember, like, you didn't really know what was happening. There wasn't that much information out there. But what are you gonna say to these employees that have been with you from day one and who, you know, like, oh, okay, go out and find a job and we'll call you when you're open again, you know, like, I mean, yeah, I get it. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. So what else can I do? So then I started thinking about, well, you know, I just didn't see a lot of stories out there actually about what restaurants and business owners were doing, you know, like, and I always thought that was really funny, you know, like, why is nobody writing about like, all like one thing is when you hear like, oh, okay, restaurant industry, like the people who are speaking for those restaurant industries are pretty big people. You know what I mean? Like, let's keep it real. I mean, pretty big people, you know, like they're not like, listen, like those people are not, you know, mi respeto to those people, but you know, you're not eating frijoles and tortillas for dinner. You know what I mean? And so like, it's like nobody was covering these business owners and actual people who were losing their jobs or had to continue to keep working, you know? And I'm just like, you know, I wonder what it would be like if, like, say that, and I had already done meals before through a friend of mine, Eric Bruner, in DC, where he had raised this initiative, Power of 10 with Capital One, where he was literally giving, and this was such a great startup and helped us so much. It was like getting a huge catering order, and you have to partner up with a non-for-profit organization. And it's like if you had a certain amount, like a business order for 4 weeks to get you started. You know? So not only were you going to be able to employ your employees, but then also and pay them, buy food, but also be able to be a service of your to your community, right, and to the organization of your liking, you know. And so we had picked Logan Square Neighborhood Association, and an incredible organization, beautiful collection of women who are so involved in the community. I feel like a lot of times people think that Logan Square is like, oh, it's you know, the new Lincoln Park or something. Like, nope, it's not at all. You know, like they clearly don't live on my block. You know, it's not like that at all. You know, there's so many homes everywhere. There are families living in these homes, and you know, and also a lot of times there's so many resources out there, but people don't know how to get to them. So I feel like they do a really good job of doing this, and they really care, and they really are all over the place. So we did that, and we loved it, and it was an incredible experience with all of us. I couldn't remember the last time. Oh yeah, I did. When I got in trouble doing community service. That was like teenage days. But you know, like it was just so, there's nothing like giving something and not asking for anything in return, but then also like knowing who lives in your neighborhood, like who are the people of this neighborhood. You know, like it was incredibly gratifying. It felt so good to do this. Everybody on our team, you know, it was like such a morale booster when we needed one. And so I'm like, you know what, if I very much modeled it after that. You know, I'm like, what if we started doing free meals with the Logan Square Neighborhood Association? People come and pick them up here. I'll be able to, like, because at this point I was going to have to offer part-time work to my full-time, like at this point we had 4 employees, you know, like, and that's a huge difference for them, you know? So I'm like, okay, at least I could keep my my full-timers to full-time, and I could keep my part-timers to part-time, you know, like who would not be able to. And so, and I'm like, all right, great. Now where do I get the money? You know, so then Dish Roulette has helped us out a lot, getting like it out there. And so we came up with Todos Ponen, all of this that I just mentioned about the meals. And I'm like, all right, so the last piece of how we're going to raise this money is that we're going to do chef interviews, live Instagram chef interviews, talking about, it was like 5 very basic questions, like what's your name, where are you from, how'd you get started, what are you doing now, what do you want to do in the future. And it was really, really great. Like it made, in a time where there wasn't a lot of human interaction, like I got to learn some people I already knew, and then some people I just reached out to, and I'm so glad that we did. And so it just made our community a little bit smaller in general. And then I also wanted to highlight only people of color, you know, like, and again, because I feel like it would be incredibly inspiring. I never, like growing up, I never saw, you know, I mean, again, I don't want to be a hater. Like it's not like, but it was always male, white chefs. Like I've worked with some incredible ones. Like I'm not knocking that at all, but I felt like it would be very nice for, especially, you know, I see, you know, coming from, you know, a predominantly Latino neighborhood, where I'm at now, and then in our restaurant, you know, like I feel like if you just see more people doing things that like, hey, you know, where you came from, or wherever it may be where you come from, you know, like it's inspiring, you know, it makes you be like, oh, I could do that too. Like, oh, see, like, so I feel like, you know, I thought that was really it would be really, really great. And, I know that I would have enjoyed that a lot. And so that's what we did in the chef interview. So that's where we raised all of the money. I kept on hoping and thinking that, so many people have so much money out there. I kept on thinking that somebody with a lot of money was going to be like, oh man, what you're doing is awesome. Here's $10,000. But that never happened. So shout out to all the people who gave their hard working money to us to allow us to do this, and,
and it's still ongoing right now. And
well, right now we're trying to restock. So we're gonna do the next portion of this is going to be for comida de mi abuela, which is going to be in the summer. And then I also, because I was always going through the Logan Square Neighborhood Association for their non-for-profit. So I'm like, you know what? It is something in the longevity of what we want to do is to open up a non-for-profit where, it is helping working mothers, also working families, really, I should say, working families, children. Working families and children, I feel.
I love that.
Where did you get this kind of this desire to build a community? Did you grow up with that? I know when your parents opened their first business, there was a lot of hate or people saying, "Hey, man, you're on our territory," kind of thing.
Yeah, it was very much like that. My parents, I remember telling me, man, again, they didn't have. They're gonna be like, "Why do you say we don't have a lot of friends?" But I mean, because they're busy. When you're in it, you're in it. They're working. They had a business. They had children. So I mean, it really didn't have a lot of friends. And then, it was one of those things when they were opening up the restaurant. It was a lot of, and I saw it first-handedly, with my dad when I would go out and get all the produce and get all the stuff. A lot of sort of hate on hate, Mexican hate on hate businesses, where this mentality of there could only be one, or and I feel like that's always so ugly, you're never gonna get ahead, and that's one of the things that is been always super poisonous and dangerous in our communities, of that mentality that there could only be one, and I think that that's definitely something that I've seen a huge shift in, probably when in my 30s, where I see chefs really, other Mexican chefs, embracing everybody. What everybody does is so incredibly different. There should never be this sort of thing that sort of competition of there could only be one Mexican chef, or there could only be one, I feel like that's such a small,
It's
inconfident
scarcity mentality.
mind.
That drives me crazy.
And
in
dangerous
music,
for
too.
future. Yeah. That's never, that's not what we should be doing.
Yeah, I don't think people realize just because we don't have it doesn't mean there's not a lot of fucking money out there.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. And it's you have to have that abundance mentality, and I think what Tom and I try to do with whatever we're doing is like you said, embrace people or businesses that are around us, and especially Korean businesses. We've seen a big kind of rise in Korean restaurants here in Chicago over the last decade or so. And not gonna lie, there is a part of me that's what the fuck, man? But but also it's just it's great to see, It's
great to see.
It's hell yeah, there's more of us out there, and how do we help each other? How do we support each other? How do we highlight what we are doing and share our culture, And I think it's only beneficial to make sure that, that we are in full support of what each other are doing. So I love that you are also part of a network of, is it Latinx or Mexican chefs here in Chicago?
I'd say both. I mean, I'd say both. I mean, I feel like, being at Mi Tocaya is a Mexican restaurant, obviously fellow Mexican, chefs cooks, chefs, and owners are always, just being that we're Mexican, right? But in general, I feel like all Latino and really, I mean, anybody who really wants to showcase what they're doing and get ahead and like think that you need to have money, like of course you need money, but there's so many ways, there's so much money out there, and you don't need to sort of force your, I mean, the Todos Ponen project was a complete, and so is Mi Tocaya, like we didn't have a lot of money at all. Like people laugh all the time about how much we spent in the beginning of Mi Tocaya because, and you could feel it when you walk in, like don't get me wrong. I mean, like, that we didn't pay an architect or like a design firm or like, well, because that's an incredible amount of money, like it's a lot of money. And when you don't have it to start, you need to go back to what is it that you want out of this place? And at the end of the day, I had to constantly tell myself, it's about the food, it's about the people, the rest will come. Slowly but surely, you could get new plates.
Yeah.
You could buy more silverware. You can, but like, don't dig your grave. Like you want to dig enough for a foundation, not a motherfucking grave.
I love that. Well, the space is absolutely beautiful. It's designed and feels absolutely incredible. It's such a warm and inviting space. And I know people have talked about it and written about it, and it really does feel like you're inviting someone into your home, but more so, into your culture, into your world. I cannot tell people enough about how delicious the food was and how incredible the experience is from both the front to the back. The hospitality was absolutely incredible there. I want to shed light on how people can get involved with Todos Ponen as you are coming up on a new drop here. So they can find your information at your website, correct?
Yes, at our website, there's a link that says Todos Ponen Project.
Awesome. And if there's any other ways that they can get involved, maybe it's not through money, but maybe it's through their time. Maybe it's just through their letter of support. Just show them love for what they're doing over there. I think it's incredible. And also, your restaurant right now is open 5 days a week, correct?
Tuesday through Saturday, yeah,
Tuesday through
4:30
Saturday.
to 10.
10 o'clock. I love that, by the way. And we almost showed up there pretty late one night, but I always feel bad.
No,
I'm the industry
I don't know
guy.
why?
I'm the industry
always
guy.
trying to get later reservations and people to come in. I'm like, it's 9 o'clock. Why aren't more people coming in? Like, again, like that whole mentality is so wrong. Like if you open till 10 o'clock, then you open till 10 o'clock. Like we take reservations at 10 o'clock. Like I hope I'm never in the position where like we're so slow where we have to close early because that's what, like why
That's
waste?
the opposite
Like that's,
of what we
like
want.
that should never be. And then like,
Right.
again, like you guys know how toxic like that cook mentality was for such a long time that I feel like we're still trying to get out of these entitled cooks thinking that like, oh, don't think like, who the fuck are you to say who gets to come in to eat and at what time?
Yeah.
Like you're here for, your job is this.
Yeah.
Like you don't pay the rent, you don't pay the bills, you don't pay people's salary. Like you want people to come in.
Right.
Your hours of operation are of such. And it's not going to change what time you're going to be done and out the door. Like that's false bullshit. It's not, I've seen it. So I just feel like that's like completely, and people always do say like, oh, I don't want to be the person. Like, no, be the person. Yeah. You're going to add $100, $200. More people come in, like that's going to add $1,000 to our bottom day line. Like
exactly.
It's like we want it. So no, come in next time.
Absolutely.
We kind of like took that whole idea and like and this is the funniest part. So we give a optional service fee on our tickets, and all of that goes to back of house, right? Mm-hmm. So every single person that comes in and signs up for this, the back of house is benefiting from every guest, right? So for me, it's like we're the more people come in, the better off you are financially, right? So why the fuck are you complaining about these 10 o'clock reservations?
Oh yeah, well
you know?
people don't know. Sometimes you have to really explain it to them, and then also just be the person of change. It just takes one person really.
Yeah, to be like, shut the fuck up.
But
We're here to sell food.
now
I
they're
don't know if
totally
you
like
heard.
that. Like we changed our tipping thing too, where now our cooks get tipped out every night. So
Hell yeah.
before we always did pool
Yeah,
tipping,
tip pool.
tip pools, and so we always did that, but it was always just for front of the house, and after. Once we reopened, I'm just like, why are we doing that? I see how much, the servers make so much money, and then the cooks, there's only so much I could pay the cooks. Like as much as I want to be like, oh, here's $21, $25. Like I can't afford it.
Yeah.
Like now more than ever, everything has gone up ridiculously. And so like it's just like, wow, like how am I going to do this? I'm like, you know what? You do it with the tips, like there's not one person that's ever going to say that, like when you go into the restaurant that they're tipping because of, let alone the service. There's so many times you're tipping because I just really like the way this place makes me feel. Yeah. Or like, I like it because it's on my way, or like the vibes here are great, or like the drinks are great, or the food, or it could just be the food itself, like, and so I'm like the cooks so now the tips get a piece of that. Like, how could I preach todos ponen and then still, have, it's just not fair to have, servers making $65,000 a year and then, cooks making 40.
Right.
Like it's
Absolutely.
just not fair. So like they get, so now they're in a place where they minimum get paid $21 an hour, so, and it also forces everybody to be more like, yes, that we run food, we help the dishwasher that's right next to us, like washing glasses, like, because, it's all of our bread, like, and it makes everybody look at it more that way too.
Yeah, I love that.
Speaking of good drinks over there, I love one of the things that me and Angeline do when we go out to a restaurant, especially if it's a different cuisine, is like we'll always try to order wine, which we both love, from the country of origin that maybe the food is from. And then on our last visit to Tocaya, I was super excited that you had some Mexican wine on the list, and I can't remember the server's name that took care of us.
Estefania.
Yeah.
She was incredible, by the way. And she was so excited, so passionate about the wine list and about specifically, like, I mean, me and her were already looking at the wine from Mexico. And I'm trying to remember the region that it was from. It was from a region I wasn't familiar with. And she just could not wait to tell us about it. And it was delicious. And I absolutely love that you guys are putting that out there, and it's definitely something that needs to continue to happen. And I just look forward.
We're only putting good Mexican wine out. You probably had the one from Guanajuato, which is really quite spectacular.
That's the one.
Yeah,
it was so good.
We just bought up all the cases.
I love that
in the States.
I feel the same way. We went to Galit. We had some wine from Israel that apparently. I buy wine for the restaurant, and I'm like, I can find this wine too. And he's like, no, you can't. He's like, we buy all of it. Like, and there, you won't be able to find this. Awesome. And I still remember that Asaf Chenin Blanc. I was just like, fuck. But in any case, we just want to definitely show your restaurant some love and appreciation as brothers to you in this industry, and as fellow Chicagoans here. I think what you're doing is incredible. And
thanks. But that's all. That the wine was all Estefania. Like we.
That's her program.
Really? Yeah. So she's somebody who So she's a server, but then very very quickly did we learn. She's like, hey, well, I used to do wine over at SKY, like this and that. She's like, people do ask, like, would you want to, and I'm like, yeah, why not? Like. As long as you have somebody that is, and I'm so glad that we did, so she, we invested in a wine list because of her, because of her passion. And like our wine lists, yes, they sound like a bunch of fancy words, but they're not at all, low intervention, organic, small production, interesting winemaking, old and innovated, biodynamic, which all that very much embraces who we are. I know they sound fancy, but like biodynamic especially, because biodynamic farming is something that has been practiced by indigenous people since the beginning of time. Like the indigenous people in Las Americas have been doing this, cultivating
using
this
biodynamic
and
farming,
spirituality through this. So I feel like that goes so much with what we do. Plus, I'm a Pisces, and very much I tell this story that I'm was harvested from a piece of rock that fell from the moon. My children seriously think that, my daughter seriously thinks that she comes from a long line of mermaids. So as much as I'm like, I'm just gonna keep it real with our children, and then Joe's just like, yeah, how about that mermaid story you tell? I'm like, every child needs a sense of magic, Joe.
I love that. I also, I gotta hand it to you on the wine terminology, like, definitely impressed by it. So
well, these words
awesome.
mean something, like, I only drink artisanal mezcal, and it's all because, I'm sure everybody has drank so much there's so much bad wine out there.
Yeah.
And so much bad wine for
Too
many reasons. Yeah. And like, so having a list that's comprised of ambient, whether it's ambient yeast or yeast that is being grown and harvested from the actual terroir, no sugar added, only having residual sugar, is all super important. I mean, that's exactly what we do with our food. And, all of this stuff matches our hospitality, matches our food. And so it just makes us like whole. And like, we would have never done this if it wasn't for her. So like Estefania is somebody who is is always reading up on everything, is always tasting, is so self-sufficient. And, you got to go and visit. We get sad sometimes. She's like, not a lot of wine sold today. And she like says it like if I'm going to like yell or something. I'm like, but it, she
that's
just feels it so much. Yeah.
And it's
around the world,
I love that.
Yeah. So, it's really great to have, our cocktails have always been great. And now we have, wine joining
I love that.
it. So I feel like we're, good on that.
Yeah.
She was ready to pounce.
Yeah.
She came in and just like asked a wine question. She was like, yes.
I thought we had our wine expert last week here.
And she's all about having, breaking down that sort of thinking that you can't use. Have you ever, like, again, language and terminology, when we say that something tastes like, our team doesn't know what the fuck cassis tastes like. You know what I mean? Like, they don't know what currants taste like, but they know what tamarindo tastes like. You know what I mean? Even flavor profiles, things that are very, very, again, we're using flavor profiles that we know, to talk about this. Yeah. And then also understanding the history of wine. The history of wine is crazy. And, did you know that, so Mexico used to grow a lot of really good wine, but then what happened was that the Spaniards were really upset. Spain was very upset and started and made it illegal because they were starting to grow not only it was flourishing, but also, so they made it illegal, and they actually completely suppressed anybody who was actually doing it. I mean, you would do some hard time, and so that is really why, there's a lot of little things like that, including olives as well.
That happened with Stratocasters, actually.
Yeah.
Fender Stratocaster started making them in Japan for the cheaper lower model in Japan, and they started dunking on the American models. They're like, we got to cancel that.
Yeah.
So there's there's a limited 3 years in the 80s of Stratocasters.
Cool.
Isn't that crazy?
That are now collectible and more expensive, and they're just good craftsmanship. People cared. And they were like, "Oh, you care a little too much."
So there's just little things like that, like pieces of history where you're just like, "Oh, wow," and wine was grown first in the Americas. Wine was grown first in Mexico, you know, and this is just things again that when people want to, and Estefania, she was born in Colombia, and she talks about many times where she's had some great mentorship. She's also had some terrible mentorship where she was in her community of wine, fellow wine experts, somms, really sort of always treating her inferior.
Right.
And I'm just like, in your face. Stefania's the real deal, because she puts herself out there. She's actually tasting. She's actually experiencing, and that's the number one thing that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, big shout
And
out
learning.
to Stefania. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, in case you wanted to go and visit and experience this for yourself, Andy, you want to share the information?
So you can find their website, www.mitocaya.com. Also on social media, it is at Mitocaya. That's Mitocaya, and they are located on the corner of Logan and California at 2800 West Logan Boulevard.
And your personal Instagram, should you want to share it, is?
You know what? What is it? Diana? I think it's Diana La Chef. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Diana
Awesome.
La Chef.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I learned an incredible amount from you, and it's been an absolute pleasure to hear everything that you've shared with us this afternoon.
Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chef.
Thank you.
Shout outs.
Oh, shit.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I want my shout outs.
This is how I edit it. There's
there you
like 4
go.
endings, and I fucking
There you go.
gotta shuffle them all around and put the applause at the end.
There we go.
Go ahead.
So, Deanna, is there any place you wanted to do any shout outs for?
Yes, one in total particular. Yadi, Chef Yadi, Casa Yadi in Fullerton and right around Kimball. She just reopened and just redid the inside of her restaurant. She's beautiful, beautiful Dominican food. I mean, just the food is incredible. She loves cooking with vegetables. So Casa Yadi, you guys gotta go. Casa Yadi is where it's at.
Casa Yadi.
Yeah.
Awesome. I gotta check it out. I've never heard of this one. So
Woman owned,
Oh, yeah.
Dominican. I mean, she's cooking food of her ancestors and then some.
awesome.
And that's on Fullerton and...
Right by Kimball.
Okay. It's on Kimball somewhere.
Awesome. Well, you guys go ahead
On
and
the
check it
corner.
out.